Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Max Bottinger. I am a junior at Columbia studying political science. I am Afro-Texan Bavarian. My mom is black from Texas, my dad is white from Germany, from Bavaria, and me, I'm kind of somewhere in between.
Okay, I'm Keenan Smith. I'm a junior at Columbia University. I'm studying race and ethnicity studies. I'm a black, queer, mixed person from Flint, Michigan. And yeah, that's I guess a summation.
My name is Sammy. I'm from Los Angeles. My mom is Mexican and my dad is white. My mom came to the U.S. when she was a kid with her mom and her sisters. My dad is like purebred American white, like grew up in the suburbs of like LA. Isn't like one of those white people who will try to be like, I'm Irish and German or whatever. Like he's just purely white. What else should I
I'm Virginia. I am from Alabama and I was born in Hengshan, China, which is outside of Changsha, kind of close-ish to Shanghai. And I was adopted when I was a year and 4 months. To my parents, who are two, well, I guess they weren't middle-aged then, but now they're middle-aged white women who are Jewish and lesbians. And so I was kind of raised in a culturally Jewish household. I went to Jewish day school for the first 7 years of my life. And then I came to New York. I've always sort of, because of my parents, I've always sort of had like a kind of tangential relationship to being Chinese, but never really had the sort of like Asian American home experience that you see kind of stereotyped a lot.
Well, I guess maybe most importantly was language and speaking Spanish. So when I was 2 years old, well, both of my parents are fluent in Spanish, and they wanted to raise me to be, and my sister to be bilingual. But when I was 2 years old, I wouldn't let my mom speak to me if she was speaking Spanish anymore, because I guess as a 2-year-old I had already formed or conceptualized opinions about Spanish somehow. And my parents, being new parents, listened to me like idiots. But I mean, I guess I can't really blame my mom, because like that must have been like the most like, I don't know, startling experience to have your 2-year-old child be like, I don't want to speak your language anymore. So like, I think that if I had been able to speak Spanish, that would have made life a little bit easier. But then I also probably would have identified as more Mexican.
I think, you know, it kind of goes back to this theme of being able to kind of float and socialize everywhere and kind of feel comfortable in multiple settings, you know, visiting my black family in Texas, visiting my white family in Germany. Those are always, I mean, two very, very different settings, and I kind of learned how to be comfortable in those, and I think that's something that, you know, from an early age on I've been doing, and something I continue to do is have a strong sense of adaptability and very, very accommodating to new circumstances.
I mean, definitely a lot, obviously, and I think that and growing up in Alabama with that was a really big part. I don't think I've ever been in any space where I felt like I wasn't a minority in some sense, and I think that has like made me a much more like aware person and made me a much more compassionate person to kind of never really be, obviously I have privilege, but never to be in a place where there's like unquestionably no sort of sense of unbalanced power on my end, and I feel like that like growing up in a home where the idea was that like we were gonna kind of really celebrate what made us different and really try to find and like accept what made other people different was like something that like made me, I think, a better person.
Um, I do believe in race. I believe that race is a construct, but at the same time I think that it has a very much so real effects. I think that it is something that exists and will exist for the foreseeable future, just as I think that gender is something that is a construct that many people say is not real, but for many people it is very real because it is like their lived experience and it very much so affects their day-to-day life. These two sort of things very much so affects one's safety in society, one's ability to live without being hampered by like structural as well as physical violence.
Yeah, I think race is absolutely real. I get like really angry when people are like, oh, race isn't even real, like it's a social construct. It's like, well, everything is a social construct and it still has real effects on people's lives. Like you can really say that about anything. Like money is a social construct, but people die every single day because of it, and like people die because of race. People are incarcerated because of race. Like I don't know if I have like a clear definition of what it is. I don't think it's scientific, like you know, in the weird way where the Nazis used to measure people's heads and be like, look, there's a difference. But I think that like it's very real because it's coded in like laws and social structures and the judicial system and literally every like part of our society. So there's no point in arguing whether or not race is real because it is in this society, and it's not, and us having a discussion about like, oh, but like as human beings, whatever, like that doesn't, there's no point to that discussion other than for someone to ignore racism.
I think racial identity is kind of different than race in terms of society. I think one is a little bit more, not fluid per se, but like, you know, based on experience, and the other is kind of a projection of what people want to see in you.
Not for race as we know it. Obviously, you know, there's different levels of melanin and different people that'll make you look different from one another, but kind of the notion of race is, you know, something that is constructed in the sense that, you know, the othering between, you know, someone who is white and someone who's black, there's, you know, a value difference or a hierarchical difference. That's where, you know, I don't think there's a scientific basis for race.
White.
I don't really identify with being white. Like I don't see myself as being white. I see myself as sort of having like a cultural sort of fluency in, I guess, like white spaces. I feel like I have a somewhat of an understanding of like how to navigate those spaces, but I do so always as a marked body. I always do so as a black body, but I guess it just depends because like in familial spaces, there's always this like understanding of me being sort of like, you're not black, you're Keenan. Like there's sort of being like this, the familial relation taking over the racial aspect. It's sort of like they look past that and see me as opposed to whatever they don't want to see.
Right.
So it's not really that I don't identify with being white, it's just that I just am not white. It's more so like that I have like this cultural upbringing surrounded by whiteness.
I think that especially in the last few years, I've come to actually identify as like mixed, instead of as being like I'm half white and half Mexican. I think especially because a lot of people view mixed race people who are mixed with white as kind of like a watered down version of their ethnicity, which is really annoying. And I think because of like the whole language thing, and everything like that, it's like I was never, like I felt as if I was like fake or being like an imposter if I tried to say that I was Mexican, even though I feel like in many parts I am, but even saying that, like I feel like I'm lying. So, but then I would never call myself white. So that's why I think being mixed is like something that I've been able to find empowering to identify with.
So you don't necessarily...
It depends on the location. I think I identify more as a black man in Germany, when I'm, visiting Germany, visiting family and so on. And I think I identify more as white here, when I'm in the States. I think that's, for me, kind of race is very linked with nationality for me. So, here I feel more as the white German man, like my dad. And in Germany I feel more being a black American, like my mom.
I think the way that I've been sort of thinking about it, because like obviously religion is not the same as race, it's more kind of like, I was reading some article or something that was talking about like the idea of like a tribe, and I feel like in terms of that, like I have much more in common, I share the same experiences with people of like the Jewish tribe than I do of like the Asian American or even just the Asian like tribe, and like I think I would never say that I'm not one or the other, but I feel like more comfortable in spaces where like the Jewish like culture is like the thing that's shared versus the like color of my skin.
Oh, absolutely. Like all the time, every day of my life. Yeah, I mean, it can come in terms of like my family, my Mexican family, like calling me like white or something like that, or like going to high school and always like not being Mexican enough. It comes every single time I try to speak Spanish or try to understand it. I've never really had a problem with white people rejecting me. That doesn't really matter to me that much. So if it's happened, I don't really notice it. But yeah, I think it's the most when it comes from like your family, which isn't like my family is never like you can't say you're Mexican, but it's like we've had different experiences growing up. Like all of my cousins are Mexican, and they also like have grown up in like more working class communities, and like had just like we've had different experiences growing up, even though we did all grow up together. So there is like, I don't know, I feel like I haven't really like thought about this that much, but like I feel like there is like maybe some kind of resentment there, so it's impossible for there not to be any kind of like rejection, even if it's like small.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. I don't think I feel rejected. As I said, I don't feel kind of completely integrated and accepted by either, but at the same time, I think, both do accept me, but it's the question of accepting to the point of me feeling completely ingrained in one or the other, which I don't think is the case.
I think that, I've never really felt rejection in a sense of like cultural or racial respect from those folks. I would say the rejection comes in the form of being like, you're mixed versus like saying like you're black, or being like, I see you as Keenan not being black. That would be the rejection. That would be the sort of like rejection of who I am versus like who they want me to be or who they think of me as. From black folks, I really, at least in terms of my family, absolutely not. Like there's very much so like an understanding like that, like they might have chastised or like made fun of my dad for marrying a white woman, and they definitely like made fun of my mom when they had those like family interactions, but like it was always coming to me with love and sort of understanding. I think it's more just like in, I guess, political spheres, there's like a questioning of mixed folks or people who acknowledge the fact that they are mixed, because it's like this idea that you're positing yourself as being like in proximity to whiteness, and so that would be the only like rejection that I felt.
Sure.
I don't know if I feel rejected, but I do not feel at all at home in like Chinese or Asian American spaces. And that makes me feel, honestly, kind of guilty sometimes because I feel so, like, honestly, like, anxious in spaces that are where I'm technically not even a minority anymore, but I feel like there's such a disconnect between, like, what I've experienced and what, like, most other people have experienced. So a lot of times I find that, like, when I, like, am in, like, something like, I've never even gone to, like, an Asian American Alliance meeting, but, like, those kind of things, I feel like not that I'm rejected, but I don't know really how to connect with what they've experienced except on a very, like, superficial way, and I feel like it's almost, like, sad that, like, I have definitely, obviously, even though I don't know about it, like, some sort of, like, rich culture that, like, is so inaccessible to me, and that, like, as much as I think I could try to do it, it would always feel fake, and it would always feel almost like I was appropriating a culture, even though it is, like, in a biological sense, mine.
I think, if you define fetishize as people having this obsession with, this is what our kids are going to look like in 2050, like you're what our kids are going to look like in 2050. I think that's the extent to which society fetishizes mixed people. I've personally never felt, like sexually fetishized, romantically fetishized as a mixed person. I think, I've always been romantically involved with people that are, like, for me and not just, for the mixed race part of me.
I mean, yeah, like that, like, I think that I do feel fetishized when, I think there's a specific fetishization that comes from being, like, somebody finding out or, like, realizing that you are, like, you have a white parent, and I think it's, like, it's a very marked distance from, distancing, or a marked fetishization compared to, like, regular light skin fetishization, just because it's, like, it's the same sort of idea of, like, oh, you're lighter, like, you're this, like, high brown, like, you're not the same, like, you're not as dark as them, but it's also this understanding of, like, oh, you're, like, this combination, that you are, like, the multitudes, you are, like, this hybrid, which I wouldn't say is, like, more severe, or, like, more intensely fetishized than black-skinned, like, or light-skinned black folk who aren't mixed. I think that specifically is, like, a relationship to blackness that is highly fetishized. It's like, oh, it's a very different thing, and I wouldn't try to compare them, but I definitely do think that the idea of hybridity is very much so fetishized sexually.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I haven't felt it personally in a while, but I mean, there's just, like, that whole thing. It's like, oh, everyone wants a mixed baby, and, like, I've gotten in, like, fights with people about this, where it's, like, the first question out of their mouth will be, like, what are you? Or maybe they'll ask my name first sometimes, but, like, especially with guys, it's just, like, I mean, you get it from, like, both sides. It's, like, people of color, like, also fetishize mixed people in a weird way because it's, like, giving them access to whiteness somehow, and, I mean, like, white people do because, I don't know, for all different kinds of reasons, but it's, I don't know, it's like, it's just this feeling. It's also why I don't like telling or, like, if the first question out of someone's mouth, like, if I'm talking to them, I don't know, like, out at a bar, anywhere, if they're like, oh, like, what are you, or, like, oh, like, you look really exotic. It's like I'm obviously going to be on the defensive immediately. It also is just like, especially like as like a girl, like you would definitely feel it more because it's always, you're not only being like fetishized, you're being like sexualized at the same time, so it's like massively uncomfortable.
Why do you think that people fetishize mixed race people?
I think there's a lot of reasons. I think one is that like we're supposed to be this like post-racial like melting pot America, which is obviously not true, but like mixed people are supposed to be proof that like racism is over, kind of. And I think that like this embodiment of mixture, or this like physical proof of I don't know, this physical proof of like the blending of races is like very attractive to some people, because like you don't have to confront these like race issues. You could just interact with this person and like feel okay.
There are like times when like I would go to like, I don't do this anymore, but when I would go to like Hillel like freshman year, and like it would have to like sort of my presence there would have to be qualified because I didn't really fit, it's like aesthetically, like visually, what certain kind of communities look like. And so I think in that way I have had to.
Or
No, I don't. I think it kind of, you know, seeing someone with my complexion, and when I had the afro, my hair, and you know, knowing my name is Maximilian Peter Bottinger, I think that's telling them enough. I never, you know, tell people that I'm black and white unless it's, you know, asked for on a census form or in person.
I do feel a pressure to explain myself when people sort of, because like I think that there's often in interacting in majority any space, I feel like there's often this pressure to like explain yourself as to like why you're there.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, like I don't really get it at like family functions, but at, I guess, like if I were to ever have visited like a predominantly white like high school, or like if like different spaces around Columbia, like different predominantly white spaces on campus, there's definitely a pressure to be like sort of like, where are you coming from, which is very typically like, I want to sort of compartmentalize you. I want to understand like how I need to treat you and what I can say in front of you, but
to be able to like speak on a lot of these issues, like you are seen as like more valid, like if you are a person of color, like in these classes. I don't know, I mean, like I feel like that pressure every single time I have to fill out any kind of government form or any form. So, and then, you know, there's always the question of like, what are you, which I get less here, or maybe not, but like it seems less because of the people I surround myself with. I think there always is a pressure to identify, and I always feel uncomfortable when anyone asks me, even though like.
I went to a German school, a German high school. I also spent some time abroad in Germany, and I had a big afro at that point, so kind of the perennial question of, can I touch your hair, was kind of the standout thing, you know. Can I touch your hair, and wow, you speak German like us, when, you know, I hold a German passport and arguably speak better German than all these people around me, yet I'm still kind of marginalized to my hair, and something, you know, exoticized and something that shocks people.
I mean, one interesting thing is, okay, so recently for a project for a class, we had to do like a creative project literally regarding anything about ethnic studies. So I chose to interview my parents about like how they decided to raise me and my sister, in terms of like language, race, and their marriage, whatever. My dad said that he doesn't like the term mixed. Like he says like, or he said, I didn't know this at all, which seems like an oversight, but that he was like, yeah, I don't like the term mixed, like I feel like it means like mixed up, like you have mixed parentage, but like you're not like mixed, you know. It was like, I mean, reading their responses in general was like really emotional, but that one was just like kind of disturbing, because like, as I said before, like being mixed is something that I really identify with, or have come to find like an empowering identity. So like having my dad, who's also white and like can't really tell me anything about that, like say that was really strange, about how there can be just really like this cognitive dissonance between our experiences. It's also
and there was this British woman who I think was leaving EC, was just like going back home or something, and she was, I guess, like middle-aged or something, and she was like coming up to the desk and was like, do you have any bag people that can load my bags into the taxi? And I was like, no. And she was like, you don't really have anybody, like not even any like any extra staff, facility people like that could do it? And I was like, no. And then she just sort of turned around flustered and got on the phone with somebody, and she was talking, and then she was like, yeah, I was trying to get somebody to get my stuff, but the man at the desk like clearly doesn't speak English, so I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was like, excuse me, I do speak English fluently.
I was like, on the way to New York from Alabama, like after Thanksgiving or something, and I was like in the TSA line, and like I like go, and like my name is like very like American sounding, whatever that means. Like, I don't know, there was no really basis for it except for the way that I looked. And like the TSA agent was just like, oh, ni hao, and I was like, I don't speak Chinese. And he was like, oh, you don't? And I was like, no, I don't. He was like, not at all? And I was like, no. And he was like, oh, that's really disappointing. And I was like, it's disappointing for you? Like, what?
I don't think so. I don't think I can relate to the poem. Just by virtue of it being pretty morbid, violent, you know, kind of having a negative outlook on life. I've seen kind of being at the border of white race and black race is much more of an advantage than, you know, kind of being stopped at a migration checkpoint, or kind of having to reject a certain part of my heritage, or carrying a burden on my back. I've always seen it as more of an advantage than a disadvantage.
I definitely agree, or I identify with the idea of feeling like my body is a battleground. I don't know if I agree with a lot of the sentiments that she feels like about like how all of the parts of you are equally like denying any of them is just as bad as denying any one of the others.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I agree with some of the things that she says about like being none of these, but like I get the like I do identify with the sentiment of being all of them, but like I don't, at least for me specifically, like I don't really ever feel white
Mm-hmm.
in that same way, that if that's what she's sort of getting at.
In any way?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot for me, so a lot of what I was getting from the poem is kind of being about this in-between space where you're kind of connected to maybe multiple sides, multiple borders, and then there's kind of this like maybe positive thing about sort of mixing and kind of I don't know, like making your kind of history yours, but then also this sense of like kind of not belonging to any one by belonging to multiples, and sort of the kind of so the sixth stanza, the sort of you are the battleground where enemies are kin to each other, you are at home a stranger. The idea that like the crossroads of like your identity maybe kind of are in conflict with one another, and in that you can't really find a place of settling. I'm not like mixed myself, so I don't relate on that level, but the idea of coming from really disparate backgrounds and sort of not really being able to be sure which one is mine to claim, I think definitely rings really true for me.
The first time I read it, I definitely did feel some kind of connection to the poem, or like it really was somehow representing my experience as well. Like, because I'm half white, half Mexican, the line where it's like eating whole wheat tortillas was funny because it was like what my white dad would do. So yeah, it's like the whole book in itself is very emotional because it's really all just about how she deals with this mixture and like how everything is a contradiction, which is accurate.